I feel almost embarrassed about making this. No, I do feel embarrassed about making this. So this was when I was studying I, and I. So this perimeter right here is a radius of 1. So this would be my 1. I would be right here. This would be I over 2. This would be 3I over 2. So the diameter, absolute value of the diameter is 3. And then, well, this area right here in the background is a picture of my face, with this area being like my left eye. This is my hat. This is my temple area, a little bit of hair. My ear would be over here. So I thought I was being clever by shrinking my eye. Epicycloid, hypocycloid, aka asteroid. Though, as I've learned, asteroids can be separated in different parts. This is a asteroid whose unit component is separated into 48 parts. And it's interesting that there's so much pattern here. There's so much pattern here that to say that this circle is separated into 48 parts makes me say, what? Because it looks like so much. And 48 doesn't seem like so much. But then, of course, like this would be 0, 1, 48, 0. Or wait, 1, 48. Or however it goes. So then these would separate it in half. So then you have 96. But anyway, this is essentially the wrong construction. I've yet to make my 60 construction, which separates my ta over 4 or pi over 2 into 15 instead of 12, which makes everything 60 instead of 48. But this is a hodgepodge, so I figured, what the heck. And I'd include it. I know, but whatever. That's part of what's happening right now. Is that because there's the 1% that the Bernie Bros deride against, and then there's the other 1% who's been waiting for this day when institutions are no longer between one, a woman, a man, a woman, and the truth. We're in the midst of dissolving institutions as nodes of knowledge, but not in the name of anarchy, not in the name of a higher truth that is beyond these organizations, but that these organizations well, let me tell you a story. And this video is about story. I'm in a rut right now because I'm in the midst of working on several projects. This is actually an old project that I've returned to. You might notice some of the imagery if you've been following, but that it's a slight deviation from what I've made before, even though many of the things I've made before were actually augmentations of this form. So I'm still focused on interference patterns of Archimedes spirals. And what I think is unique about some of the images that I've made in my ignorance is that I've been able to pursue paths that wouldn't otherwise have been pursued because of my crude, relatively speaking, my crude construction methods. Had I had more exact or more refined or more contemporary, more technologically relevant means, though I may have come up in some ways with more impressive images, the impressiveness of the images that I have come upon, I wouldn't have come to. So yeah, I have several things that I've been working on. I've got my I've got my plus or minus square root of 1, or I'm sorry, plus or minus square root of I content I've been working on. And I'm about to make a video on that. Okay. That goes back to this. Goes back to this. And then I've got my Da Vinci Code, Michael Jackson conspiracy thing I'm working on. That's just pretty much in my mind. Today was special in some way because of this image, which turned out different than I have it in my mind. But I'm pretty happy with it, and I thought it worth documenting. And I recognize how silly it is that something of this nature be documented. But I'm in a rut. I have my Dances with Bats thing I've been working on. I have my leap year. That's my leap year thing I've been working on. And this is an idea I've had in my mind for years. Years and years and years. And the whole idea, even though it's done with a pencil so I can't tell that it was actually deliberate, that it's a gray-faced Santa in a black suit with white trim. And I often thought myself dressed up in this suit, painting my face gray with a white beard and a black suit with white woolly trim. Not just a pencil black and white drawing here, but pretty much like that. Standing with a placard at a Santa line at a mall. And the sign I originally thought of was, "Forgive your parents for lying to you." I pretty much figured I'd get beat up at some point. Never did it. But anyway, today was the day. I finally drew it. I've been thinking about it for just shy of 10 years, probably. Maybe 10 years, maybe more. So, it was worth doing. Maybe I can refine it some, and now I have some new ideas for the gray-faced Santa. Maybe if he has a little pop, his nose will turn red. Nope. Guess you better find Rudolph.
That was easy.
Alright. So I'm trying to rekindle the spark. That's what this is about. I make bad decisions. This is my Marjery thing, and the only reason I call it Marjery is because I'd been watching a video and written down the word Marjery, and it was on a card beside this video. The first time I played it, I had like a little parabolic mirror and was trying to glean a little bit out of the multidimensionality of the 2D surface, trying to see what I could glean in 3D out of the 2D. And anyway, what I like about this image, well, or rather, one of the symbolisms that connect in my mind in a less mathematical way, because even though this looks hodgepodge hibbity-dibbity, in a sense, it's really mathematical. It's pretty much 12-point circles moving back and forth each side of the horizon over each other with different colors, and leaving like a frame trail behind, so that we're getting, like, for instance, this is the first frame where everything's all even. Basically what's happening is this point here of this triangle, so there's 3 points, well 6, well 4 going down to here, 6 if you include these twice, because there's the triangle here and the triangle here. But anyway, basically these points are moving from here back and forth, stretching these lines and bending them, but it's going in both directions at once, on the bottom and the top, with different colors overlapping each other. So this is like the primary geometric structure. And what happens when you print, and print here I mean specifically as overlapping that movement back and forth, and how that affects the underlying 9-point/12-point circle geometries on the top and the bottom, moving in each direction over each other. And in this case, it just so happens to be in 16ths. So there's 16 separations from here to here, and from here to here, 32 across the whole thing. But again, it's this mirror images, and it's mirrored this way and this way, but with different colors. And there's like a million different, well, not a million, but there's a lot of different ways to mirror and to simulate mirroring. And in this case, it might be too mirrored from top to bottom, and it might be too mirrored in reference to color. Perhaps the background should be gray, and there, instead of, essentially my geometries are flexing in whites and lights on a black background, and perhaps top to bottom it should be more moving in whites and blacks over a gray background with more, it would give more interference. But anyway, one of the symbologies that I associate with this picture is, to me, this is a dinosaur. That may just mean that I have my human geometry construed. That's a big statement that reaches into a lot of like the testing of faith. But it depends what you mean by faith. Depends deeply, and this image is deeply associated with faith. Faith is fidelity, and fidelity is phi. And phi is associated with fifth, and phi is associated with first. First and fifth both start with fi, phi. Not unimportant. But also, phi in some sense is derived from like an A plus a B equals a C type of thing. But if you do an A minus B equals C type of thing, or rather a C minus B equals A, or a C minus A equals B type of thing, then you're all wrapped up in root 3. And, well, this is root 3. If this is 1. Yeah, so it's like the whole Eisenstein numbers, like anything tied up in Eisenstein numbers and phi numbers, they're all really tied together and they're part of the same equation, plus or minus, plus or minus. Anyway, to make a long story really long, I associate, because I've also associated this image, if you've seen some of my other videos, my Marjery images, with sound. And one of the most profound sounds has to do with a tone and that tone's root 3-ness. And whether or not that tone is tied up in a foot or a light foot wavelength, or if it's inherent to the ratio. Like, some ratios are important, some wavelengths are important, and some ratios of wavelengths are important irrespective of some wavelength ratios where you have a ratio between two wavelengths are important irrespective of the initial wavelength. Other wavelengths in and of themselves alone are important irrespective of other waves they interfere with. What I'm really trying to find is something where those things meet, where important wavelengths meet with important ratios of wavelengths. And a lot of that relates back to like Lainger, Suzanne Lainger, I think. Susan Lang or Susan Lainger, Philosophy in a New Key. I think she might be the missed genius of our age. Ahead of her time, but seemingly like behind her time, or just like, I don't know. Though it was quite a while back, and quite a while from like here to then, and then go back a little bit further, and you get into what is it, Alfred Hitchcock's The Vanishing Woman, or The Vanishing Lady. I think it was one of his first talkie movies, because he used to do silent movies. I don't know if everybody knows that, but yeah, The Vanishing Lady, where basically a message, an important diplomatic spy message was sent via a song. The song had the message. So that ties back into my Da Vinci Code Michael Jackson. And then I'm just using this image for that. Besides the M, because of Tom Hanks and the Da Vinci Code and Michael Jackson Beat It t-shirt, piano keys, chopsticks. The way things meet up, hypersaturated forms, symbols inside of symbols inside of symbols, where everything clicks. And then other things that don't click with nothing, yet click. And that's what this dude was about. And then where things don't meet and look random, but it's just because the bit rate's wrong, the frame rate's wrong. It's wrong for what made the pattern. Yet over enough time, the periodicity and the cyclicity congeal. I'm terrible at getting to the point, and I only got 2 minutes and 55 seconds, not even. What I was trying to get to with this, before, at 10:56 or 10:50-ish, plus or minus, and maybe like, I don't know, 16:30 plus, somewhere in that vicinity, is that this is like the explicit geometry. This is the hard geometry, and by moving these lines back and forth like a really simple thing, my 12 and 9 point circle, what I get, no, this is the hard geometry of the limit, each side. But in animation, as each side reaches back and forth for each other, like this area in here, which I consider like pretty much like a dinosaur skeleton, a fossil, like some sort of anthropology or archaeology. But what it is a secondary geometric form, an aggregate geometric form. But anyway, these eye socket areas where you have this dark center with somewhat of an outline, the whole point I was trying to make about that, about these eye socket areas, there's an eye socket, there's an eye socket, whereas like in here would be like the teeth or the mouth region, is that those eye sockets remind me of the Guinness harp. And I make these images with sound, so like the Guinness harp becomes like an eye socket, but then like the eye and the ear and the connection with the inner eye and the inner ear, because not everybody knows about the inner ear. There's the pineal gland, but then Dr. Will Harkins talks about the gland in the ear. No one else talks about that except for Will Rogers. But just saying.